I've said on this show that if Malik Monk leaves in free agency, the Sacramento Kings are in big trouble. And I stand by that. But while I have the luxury of being able to just react and have a doom and gloom mindset, the Sacramento Kings have to be proactive. They need to have a plan in place in case Malik does leave. So on today's Locked On Kings podcast, we'll explore Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Use promo code LOCKEDONNBA when you sign up, and you can get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And ladies and gentlemen, for the second time in 2 weeks, I've completely recorded a podcast without my microphone being on. You would think after 7-8 years of doing this that I wouldn't do that once, let alone twice in 2 weeks. This is the second time that I'm recording this podcast, but don't worry, it's going to be better. It's going to be better than the first time because since recording that, we have the context of what happened in Game 4 of the NBA Finals. We're getting a Game 5 in Boston. I've also had some conversations with some different Locked On hosts about some of these potential plans to replace Malik Monk. So I got a little extra context. So this version is going to be better. I just wanted to let that put that full transparency out there, just so you know that I try as hard as I can to be good at my job, but sometimes I can't help but be a dork. But here we go. Let's talk about the possibility of replacing Malik Monk. It's a very real possibility, right? And one thing that needs to be consistent throughout this entire conversation that we're going to have here is none of these plans are about finding a direct replacement. There is not another Malik Monk in the league. There are players that are better than Malik at things that he does well. There are certainly players that do things differently than Malik Monk. But Malik, who he is as a personality, as the Energizer Bunny, as the floor general, as the shot creator, the facilitator, the presence in the locker room, there is no one like Malik. His uniqueness is what has allowed him to blossom here in Sacramento. I should say his uniqueness and Mike Brown's willingness and the Kings' willingness to put him in a situation where he could truly be himself and express himself and play his game on the court. That's how he got here. That's how he got to this point where he's finally going to get a big payday that he's been searching for his entire career, when a handful of years ago, he was almost out of the league, right? And if he's money motivated, we know that the Kings can only offer him $17.5 million a year. Other teams might be willing to go more than that. And if he takes the money and decides to leave, the Kings have to be prepared. I'm sure as hell hoping that isn't happening. I'm optimistic that the Kings will be able to bring him back. In fact, even if I'm going through all these plans that the Kings might have or could have, options that they have available to them if Malik does leave, I'm certainly hoping that none of these come to pass. Really, I'm hoping by the start of free agency on day one, when the Kings and Malik Monk agree to a deal, I hope he can go back to this podcast episode and go, boy, that was a waste of time. And Matt recorded it twice, and it was a waste of time. Honestly, that's what I'm hoping for. But for now, we and the Kings need to explore the possibilities of, what if Malik leaves? What do we do? So I got 3 plans. I got Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. All 3 plans, by the way, involve Keegan Murray making a significant leap. Like, just put that as a universal understanding for all of these. There is no replacing Malik Monk. These are players that are going to come in to hopefully help Sacramento in their own way make up for the void that Malik would leave behind. But it's going to be the responsibility of Keegan Murray to step up and provide the offense that the Kings would be losing in Malik. Even if they get another offensive player and bring another offensive guard in to try and make up for that. Ultimately, to get the points and to get the scoring and the shot creation that the Kings heavily relied on Malik for these past 2 seasons, that needs to come from Keegan and Keegan's development in his 3rd season more than anybody else. So I'm glad we have that understanding. All right, Plan A is all about the trade market. What teams have players available that the Sacramento Kings could go out and get a Malik Monk replacement from. I got 3 potential names. Well, I'm going to add a 4th really quick because there's one name in mind that I dream of. I'm bringing this up because I'm trying to give you an idea of like a ideal replacement player, but I'm bringing this name up in full understanding that it's never going to happen. It's TJ McConnell from the Indiana Pacers. TJ McConnell is a phenomenal backup guard. In so many ways, everything that the Sacramento Kings could want. Is his game different from Malik's? Absolutely. Very different type of player, but still a guard that's strong on the defensive end, can attack the basket, can certainly facilitate, runs the backup point. You do not ever have to worry about that spot if TJ McConnell is on your roster. And of course, he's phenomenal with the Pacers. He's been in Indiana for a very long time. Pacers aren't getting rid of him, right? Like, there's not a trade within the realm of realisticness and without going into the land of absurd where the Pacers humor a TJ McConnell trade to the Sacramento Kings. But I bring that up just to give you an idea of what I would like. But here's a name that, to my surprise, could be and maybe should be readily available. It's the guy who won NBA Sixth Man of the Year 2 years ago. Malcolm Brogdon with the Portland Trail Blazers. Malcolm Brogdon is owed $22 million next season, the final year of his contract with the Trail Blazers. Brogdon, unfortunately, this season dealt with just a smorgasbord of injuries, right? Injuries all over the place, one thing after another. He had ACL or like Achilles issues, knee issues, illnesses. Like, for some reason, Malcolm Brogdon just could not stay healthy last season. He only played 39 games. Now, in those 39 games, he was solid. 15 points per game, 44% shooting from the field, 41% from three-point range, which is incredible, 81% from the foul line, 3 rebounds, and 5 assists a game. Like, really, really good numbers when he played. Obviously, availability is important. There's the risk of his injuries, and there's the risk of he only has 1 year left on his deal, and now you're in the same situation all over again where you have to pay a guy. Granted, the Kings, in theory, should have a little more flexibility financially next summer compared to this summer with Malik Monk, but they would find themselves essentially just hitting the delay button. You replaced one Sixth Man of the Year candidate with a Sixth Man of the Year winner who's older and a different type of player, but still impactful. And now you have to pay him now. You have to figure that out. Is that worth what it's going to take to get him? But what is it going to take to get him? So I reached out to the Locked On Blazers podcast, and I was talking to them. I was like, do you think the Blazers would even humor the idea of trading Malcolm Brogdon? And they got back to me, and they're like, yo, like, we've been saying the Blazers should have traded Malcolm Brogdon at the trade deadline. Like, they're desperate for a Malcolm Brogdon trade this summer. Now, that's them. That doesn't mean it's the Blazers' point of view, but that's their point of view. They seem to think that they're available. Initially, I thought that it would probably take like a pair of second rounders plus salary filler in order to get Malcolm Brogdon to Sacramento. Maybe, just maybe, the Kings could find a way to get it done for one future first rounder and salary match. Again, is that too much to give up? Is that too big of a risk for a player who could be gone after a year and has been dealing with injuries for the last year? Maybe. You be the judge. But that's an option out there. Another option with the Boston Celtics, Peyton Pritchard. Again, full transparency. To be very clear, I'm not saying that Peyton Pritchard is a Malik Monk replacement. Malik Monk is way better than Peyton Pritchard is. Way better. So, again, understand that I'm not talking about Peyton Pritchard coming in and playing the role that Malik Monk played. But Peyton Pritchard is someone who, on the biggest stage in the game, the NBA Finals, he's playing consistent rotational minutes, right? He's averaging 9 points a game, shooting 46% from the field, 38% from three-point range, 83% from the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, playing 22 minutes a game for the Boston Celtics this season. He's an impactful role player in the NBA Finals, and he is bought into the Missoula defensive hard-nosed system that the Boston Celtics are playing. Peyton Pritchard could absolutely help the Sacramento Kings in their second unit. In the capacity of Malik Monk, no. But if you're looking for someone who can come in and help bolster that second unit that is weakened because of Malik's departure, Peyton Pritchard is potentially one of those guys. He just signed a 4-year, $30 million contract with the Celtics, so he's very affordable. So you don't really have to worry about anything like that. But the question is, what would the Celtics want for him? I'm not giving up a first-round pick for Peyton Pritchard. Maybe you could do some kind of like Trey Lyles and a couple second-rounders. Some of you are probably already thinking, God, no, I never do that deal, and I understand that hesitation. I think the Celtics might have interest in Trey Lyles because Kristaps Porzingis' future is unknown with his injuries. Al Horford's only getting older, so they might have interest there. I'm just trying to put together a theoretical deal that they would be interested in trading Peyton Pritchard for. Pritchard is not a game-changing player, but he's someone who, in theory, could come in and bolster your bench. But if your plan is to replace Malik Monk with Peyton Pritchard and that's it, you're in big trouble. Let that be perfectly known. What about Jordan Clarkson from the Utah Jazz? Jordan Clarkson is owed $14 million, a little over $14 million a year over the next 2 seasons. So you're getting him for the next 2 years. He is loved in Utah. Loved for his energy, his motor, how hard he plays. He's a good offensive player, 17 points a game, 41% shooting from the field, only 29% from three-point range, so that part's not great. 88% from the foul line, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, played 30 minutes a game for Utah last season. I reached out to David Locke of Locked on Jazz, and I asked him, like, hey, would the Jazz consider trading Jordan Clarkson, considering how popular he is there? And he said, yeah, they would. They'd listen. And I asked him, like, what would they want? Expirings? Would they want picks? What would they want? And what he said was Kevin Huerter and picks. And I assume he means multiple firsts. Giving up multiple first-round picks for Jordan Clarkson, I understand if there's hesitation there. Especially, again, you're giving up multiple first-rounders for a guy that is going to be part of your bench unit. Now, Jordan Clarkson comes here to Sacramento. He's absolutely a Kings 6 man. And he probably challenges at times Keon Ellis to take that starting 2-guard spot, maybe. But you have your 6-man solidified for the next 2 seasons if Jordan Clarkson is here. So that's not a question. But is 2 first-rounders and Kevin Huerter, a fringe starter, that's a lot to give up for a role player. I don't think I would do it. I think I would consider Huerter and a first-rounder and see where we can go from there. Asking for 2 firsts, I think, for Jordan Clarkson is too much. But if the Kings are desperate to make a move and fill that hole, which it would be a gaping hole with Malik Monk leaving, Clarkson's not a bad option, and they might be desperate enough to overpay to get him here in Sacramento. So that's plan A, the trade market. Plan B is free agency. We'll explore some names potentially available in free agency coming up in just a second. Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Game Time. You don't need another ticketing purchasing app anymore. Game Time. Game Time is it. Whether you're buying tickets for sporting events, concerts, theatrical productions, comedy shows, you name it, Game Time has it, and Game Time has it at the best prices and the best deals you are going to find anywhere else. They have last-minute deals that simply cannot be beat. We're talking about saving up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for whatever event you're interested in. They have incredible flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of a game or an event. They have zone deals too. Let's say you want to buy a game at the Golden One Center and you know you want to sit like lower bowl but pretty central, right? I want to sit close to half court, but it could be on either side. Well, you can pick those zones and Prize Picks will give you the chosen seats that are the best deal for you at a discount. They have all-in pricing, which means everything that you see, there are no hidden fees. That is what you're paying. So if you're looking at a seat and it says $30, the seat is worth $30. It's not worth $30 plus $5 in this fee and $6 in that fee and $3 in that fee. No, it is $30. It shows it to you up front. Plus, they have ticket coverage that cannot be beat. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible servicing policy in the ticket industry. So go and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So plan A was the trade market. Plan B is free agency. Now, there are more options in free agency than there are in the trade market, and the best part about free agency is you have the potential to add someone for money and not for giving up any assets or draft picks or anything like that. So, Matt, why is it plan B then? Why would that not be plan A? Because we're in Sacramento. Sacramento notoriously, historically, has a hard time in free agency. Free agency is fair game. It's player choice, right? Trades, as long as the other team agrees, kind of forces the player to come here. So free agency's always been tricky for Sacramento. That being said, the Kings aren't trying to attract a superstar. Be great, but they're not trying to, right? We're not looking for Malik Monk's replacement to be an all-NBA caliber player or an all-star. That's not what we're looking for. There have been solid role players that have chosen, and even starting level players that have chosen the Sacramento Kings in the past. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, or it's perfectly fine to have high expectations for the Kings to be able to find a suitable replacement or replacements for Malik in free agency if that's the route they have to go. So what are some names in mind? Jose Alvarado. He's a restricted free agent with the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, just for context, a restricted free agent means that the Pelicans have the right to match. So let's say the Kings and Jose Alvarado agree to a 3-year, $16 million per year deal. I'm just totally spitballing. I have no idea if that's what he's worth or not. The Pelicans, and if Jose agrees to it, right, and says, okay, I accept that deal. I'll play for you for $16 million a year over the next 3 years. The Pelicans have the right to go, nope, we're going to match that. He stays in New Orleans. It happened to the Kings a handful of years ago when the Kings actually made a deal with Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine agreed to sign with Sacramento, and the Bulls said nope, and he stayed in Chicago. Unrestricted free agent means the player is free to do what they want. If he accepts an offer from the Kings, the Pelicans are SOL. But Jose is a restricted free agent. He averaged 7 points on 41% shooting from the field, 37% from three-point range, 67% from the foul line last year, 2 rebounds and 2 assists per game. The Kings have the mid-level exception, right? They can offer Malik Monk $17.5 million a year. That does not mean they have $17.5 million that they can spend on anybody else if Malik walks, because with Malik's rights, they can go over the cap in order to re-sign him. They have their main piece that they have is the mid-level exception, which is worth about $12.9 million. Now, that amount could go up if the Kings trade certain players like Sasha Vezenkov or Chris Duarte. They get some of that money off their books, and the mid-level exception goes up a little bit. But a $12.9 million mid-level exception, I don't think is good enough for Jose Alvarado. I think he can get more than that. I think he will get more than that, and it'll be up to the Pelicans to match that offer. So I think if the Kings really, truly want Jose Alvarado, they'll have to free up more money than what they have currently for the mid-level exception. But that's a solid veteran. I mean, I shouldn't say he's a veteran. He's older, but he's a solid backup guard. He kicked the Kings' butts as the Pelicans were beating Sacramento 6 times this season. Just a solid option, good defensively. I think would fit in great with Mike Brown and his system. So Jose Alvarado is an option. Another option, although this one's a little more out of left field, Kyle Anderson from the Minnesota Timberwolves. He is an unrestricted free agent, so he can choose where he goes. And that's it. He is more of a mid-level exception type player. He more fits into the kind of that $12.9 million per year exception range. Difference with Kyle Anderson is we're talking about a Malik Monk replacement. We're talking about replacing a ball-dominant guard. Malik's probably more of a 2 guard, but he plays a lot of point guard responsibilities as a floor general and a ball handler. Kyle Anderson is more of a 3, probably closer to a 3-4 than he is a 2-3. So he's more of a forward than he is a guard. But he's a good facilitator and good playmaker for his size and for his position. He averages 6 points per game, 46% from the field, only 22% from three-point range. That's not good. 70% from the foul line. Averages 3 rebounds and 4 assists per game. But if the Kings want to go a little bit bigger, go a little bit longer, Kyle Anderson might not be a bad option. Another option that might be a little redundant but is out there that the Kings may want to explore is Markelle Fultz from the Orlando Magic. Markelle Fultz, I just have a feeling, and I can't really explain it, I have a feeling that Markelle Fultz is like a Mike Brown guy. To me, it kind of makes sense. Like, I think Mike Brown would enjoy having a Markelle Fultz type player. I have no idea why. It's just a feeling that I have. just based off of my understanding of Fultz's game. Fultz was a part of kind of that physical backcourt that the Orlando Magic established for themselves this year. They weren't great. They weren't locked down by any means, and a lot of that physicality came more from like a Cole Anthony than it did from a Markelle Fultz, so I'm aware of that. But he was part of it, and it was successful to some extent. So I think it would be okay to think that Fultz could come in and play kind of a physical brand of defense on the perimeter that the Kings are looking for and hoping to play next year. He averages 7 points per game, or averaged 7 points per game last year, shot 47% from the field. Again, only 22% from three-point range, 69% from the foul line, 3 rebounds and 2 assists, played in 43 games last season. So not as healthy as you would like. And the redundancy is you already have Davion Mitchell. You could argue which one's better between the two, but they're pretty similar. And like maybe let's say the Kings go the route of what we talked about a lot. Let's say the Kings use the 13th pick and Davion Mitchell on draft night as part of a package to go get Kyle Kuzma or whatever. Great. Awesome. Markelle Fultz could be an option in free agency to replace Davion. But now, of course, we're talking about a Mitchell replacement more than we're talking about a Malik Monk replacement. So it's kind of more convoluted. But he's a name that's potentially available and out there. Another name is Tyus Jones, unrestricted free agent with the Washington Wizards. Averaged 12 points per game last season, 48% from the field, 41% from three-point range, 80% from the foul line, 2 rebounds, and 7 assists. Now, he played the majority of his minutes last season as a starter in Washington. We all know Washington was a bad team. He is a point guard that does a really, really, really good job taking care of the basketball. The question is, though, would he accept a bench role in Sacramento? He's kind of undersized. I mean, he's the size of a typical point guard, but maybe a little undersized for defensively what the Sacramento Kings want to try and do. He's not necessarily known for his perimeter defense and not necessarily known for his physicality. So that might be tough. But offensively, he has a lot that he can bring off the bench. And I don't think he's going to be worth a tremendous amount of money. So Tyus Jones is another available option. Here's an option that I actually really like. It has its risks, but I really like this idea. Gary Payton II from the Golden State Warriors, another unrestricted free agent. Now, Gary Payton II has dealt with injury issues up the wazoo over the last 2 years, right? He played 44 games last season, 22 games the season before. But he has a clear connection with Mike Brown, was part of a massive part of the NBA or the 2022 NBA champion Warriors team, right? He was crucial in that NBA Finals run. He has his connection with Mike, and when he does play, when he is healthy, he is loved for the effort and intensity and hustle that he plays with, especially on the defensive end of the floor. I don't think he's going to be all that expensive. Again, he has a connection with Mike Brown. I have no idea if the Warriors want him back or not. I'm not even going to speculate on that because I can't speak to it. But I think the Kings should and would have interest. And if he can stay healthy, he absolutely would help Sacramento. Offensively, nowhere near Malik Monk. But defensively, an upgrade in a lot of ways. Again, it's about filling the hole that Malik as a whole leaves behind for the bench, not just replacing Malik Monk, the player. A player that could come somewhat close to replacing Malik's production is Gary Trent Jr., unrestricted free agent with the Toronto Raptors. Now, let's make something perfectly clear. The Kings would 100% have to find a way to free up more money to have any shot at Gary Trent Jr. So this option is probably pretty unlikely because the Kings trying to find a trade partner. There aren't a lot of teams with cap space, period. The Kings trying to find a trade partner that is willing to take on salary from them is going to be difficult. A team that's willing to take on Harrison Barnes' money or Kevin Huerter's money and send less money back, unless the Kings are attaching assets to those players to get them to take on that money for the next couple of seasons, I don't really see... Maybe it exists. Maybe it's out there. I don't know why a team would necessarily want to do it. And now that we're talking about potentially attaching assets just to free up money, there's better ways to use those assets for Sacramento. So I don't see that necessarily happening. But the Kings would have to find a way to free up money to get Gary Trent Jr. in here. But if they did, he'd be excellent. Averaged 13 points last season, 42% from the field, 39% from three-point range, 77% free throw shooter, 2 rebounds and 1 assist. So he doesn't really do more than that, but he's a solid defensive player. To me, he screams Mike Brown guy. Mike Brown, I think, would love having Gary Trent Jr. on his roster. And if Gary Trent Jr. signs with the Sacramento Kings, I think it's fair to say he would probably, I think he beats out Keon Ellis as the starting 2. If they want to bring him in off the bench, great. If he's okay with that, great. But if Gary Trent Jr. were here in Sacramento, I could see a Fox and Trent Jr. starting backcourt. And I like the idea and like the sound of that. So those are names available in free agency for the Sacramento Kings to potentially have interested in. To run through them one more time: Jose Alvarado, Kyle Anderson, Markelle Fultz, Tyus Jones, Gary Payton II, and Gary Trent Jr. All names out there that Sacramento could potentially be interested in to add to their bench and add to their rotation to help fill that hole if Malik Monk left it behind. Of course, there's some names on this list too that if the Kings brought Malik Monk back, if they could find a way to free up some money to go out and get like a Gary Payton or get one of these players, I still think that's a great option as well. But if plan A don't work and plan B don't work, they do have a fallback plan C. It's not great, but it's something. And I'll explain what it is in just a second. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stat projections for a shot to win up to 100 times your money. With PrizePicks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports team all summer long, whether it's baseball, NBA Finals action, WNBA, when football season comes back around, all the NFL and college football action. There's so many different fun, amazing ways to play on PrizePicks, and you have so many opportunities to really make some good money. There's 5 million active members, and you get on the daily action with friends and become part of the PrizePicks community. Myself and many Sacramentans are a part of that. We have a lot of fun with PrizePicks for Sacramento Kings games all season long as well. So download PrizePicks today. Go to the app or go to prizepicks.com and use code LOCKEDONNBA when you sign up for a first deposit match up to $100. You put $100 down, you get $100 instantly. You put $50 down, $50 instantly. No questions asked. PrizePicks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy. Plan C. Believe in what you got. I'm looking at Keon Ellis and I'm looking at Davion Mitchell. Now, this is not a one or the other conversation. This is both of them. If the Kings want to survive losing Malik Monk and they don't actively go out and get a replacement type player or a player to bolster the bench, then they are relying on Keon Ellis and Davion Mitchell to essentially play close to their ceilings. So this is not one or the other doing the things that I'm about to list out. This is both of them doing this. We'll start with Keon Ellis. Keon has to truly establish himself as a starting caliber guard. He doesn't have to become an amazing shooter. He doesn't have to play out of his mind. It's a lot to ask a two-way player to go from two-way to established starting shooting guard on a team that actually has deep playoff intentions. It's hard to do that. But Keon would have to realize that potential. He does that by really establishing a consistent three-point shot. He's going to get open looks playing with the players that he's playing with. He has to be able to knock them down at a high clip enough to be respected. He can't have hot stretches and cold stretches. He can't be like a 34% three-point shooter. It's got to be 36, 37, 38+%. He has to take on a little bit of playmaking responsibilities. Nothing absurd, certainly not to the level of Malik Monk or anything like that, but he has to be able to facilitate and contribute in that way. And defensively, he has to be elite, right? He has to be what Tony Allen was to the grit and grind Celtics. Just a guy on the perimeter every single night you knew could lock down the opposing team's best guard. That's what the Kings need him to be. Again, we're talking about him reaching his ceiling. This is not this should happen in his next. No, this is him being the best version of himself possible. Meanwhile, Davion Mitchell, he needs to continue his offensive success that he had at the end of last season, where He found out how to fit. He found that mid-range jump shot that started dropping. He got to his spots from three-point range and knocked down some three-point shots. He got out in transition and used some of that speed to get to some of his favorite spots on the floor as well. So he needs to continue to be some sort of offensive fit and offensive threat. He needs to be one of the guys to primarily make up for Malik Monk's facilitating off of the bench. He averaged just 1.9 assists per game last season, but he is capable of doing better because we've seen it before. His rookie year, when he was playing consistent backup point guard minutes here in Sacramento, granted that team wasn't very good, but he was averaging 4.2 assists per game that season. So he's capable of being a better facilitator. And if you can get 4 assists per game out of Davion coming off the bench while being the defensive player that we know he can be, that's not bad. And then on top of that, his on-ball defense we know is fantastic. Off night, that's what he's known for. Off-ball defense, not great. A lot of that has to do with his size. We're talking about fighting through screens, defending the perimeter better, closing out on shooters, not giving up so many open shots, doing a better job of reacting and scrambling defensively, which this entire Kings team has to do well. He's got to be able to do that. Again, if both of these players can do all these things and realize their full potential, the Kings have a shot of the two of them making up for Malik Monk's production. But I'll say this for full transparency. It better not get to plan C. If the Kings run into training camp next year and Malik's gone and their replacement for Malik is Davion and Keon, I think the Kings are in a rough spot. Bottom line, even with all these options, it's good to see there are available options to Sacramento if Malik leaves, right? You got to go some route. There's always something. None of these somethings are as good as just bringing Malik back. So that should be the ultimate goal. It still is the ultimate goal, and that's what we're rooting for and optimistic for here on Locked On Kings. But if Malik walks, the Kings got to do something, and here is some of that something. Now I want to hear from you. You weigh in. You like any of these names I talked about, any trades we talked about? You want to submit a name in free agency or a trade to go out and find a Malik Monk replacement? Go for it. Let me know. Hit me up on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, get in the YouTube chat down below and then share with me your thoughts there. You can hit me up on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can also email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Would love to hear your thoughts on this. Bottom line, we're all rooting for Malik Monk to stay. And again, I hope this podcast is irrelevant in the start of free agency and does not matter because Malik decides to stay here in Sacramento and all is right. Fingers crossed for that. Appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.